So today I was joined again by Eben van Tonder. The topic that we just broached, the tip of the iceberg, I would say, is the subject of microbes. So the discussion is not meant to be a heavy academic discussion. We do want to touch on some of the science and just bring you to where it really needs to be. But the point is, we don't have a script. We also end up chasing down a whole bunch of rabbit holes. The discussions are very informal, and we really just talk about that which we love, and that is meat. So I trust and hope that you'll find this as interesting and informative and fun as I do. And let's get into it. Hi everybody. Yes, today again back with Eben and Gil, and on today's topic we're going to talk about microbes, microbiology, bacteria, mold. I don't know, we're going to just see where we go with this rabbit, Eben. Again, I'm not sure we're going to have enough time in today's discussion to go through all of it. I mean, it's such a vast and important subject.
Huge topic.
I mean, obviously, one of the important things, and it dovetails nicely with the discussion that you and I had last week about water activity, because obviously, at the different levels of water activity, the different bacteria and microbes are activated, or, as you also said, not killed but deactivated, essentially. So that's quite interesting, but I think it's very important for meat curers around, whether they are home curers or whether they are industrial manufacturers, to understand microbes or in detail, because that's where we get all the spoilage.
On the one hand, it spoils the food, and on the other hand, it's the microorganisms that gives us those nice and unique flavors and flavor notes in dry cure products. So it's a double-edged sword. In fact, the it's so vast that without microbes, curing is not even possible. Or it would not have been possible if we were still using salpeter, the nitrates. You must reduce it bacterially to nitrites, before anything happens. So you're absolutely right. A vast topic. I was wondering, Gil, shall I maybe? I was thinking about this, maybe one should almost have a soft start to the topic, and because it is such a huge field, and a lot of people talk about bacteria and viruses and yeast and molds and stuff, and I was thinking maybe we can just start maybe by just giving very short definitions to these things, because people lump it all together as microorganisms and not necessarily know what's the difference. So
that's a good idea.
COVID is such a big thing now. What is the difference between a virus and a bacteria?
Exactly.
It's not the bacterial, it's viral. So what is the difference? I was thinking maybe we can start there. And the bacteria, of course, is a living single cell organism. And then there's the definition gets a little bit more complex after that. But we can just keep it very simple. And viruses, on the other hand, is by itself not a living thing. It needs another cell. It's a parasite. It needs to live in another cell for it to do its thing. So that big important difference between viruses and bacteria. And the mold. Let's say mold. Mold actually comes from the degrading of natural material. And you have different. It's a fungus. You get all those different colors, which in meat curing will become important. You can have the white mold or the green mold or black mold or orange mold or red mold. All the different colors of the rainbow. And some of them is some of them is good, and some of them is bad, and some of them But in general, just in touching on that issue. For the home curer, and the rule of thumb must always be to use your sound judgment.
Yes.
There's nothing like smelling. Smell the product, smell your product, and taste your product. If you doubt whether it is healthy, don't eat it. Rather err on the side of caution.
Yeah, I think that has always been sort of my philosophy on mold. And just getting back to this vast topic, I mean, I personally haven't necessarily paid too much attention to microbes other than mold, and other than understanding the reason for using things like nitrite in the battle against botulism. But obviously it goes so much deeper, as you say. And I think the problem that home curers have is that there's such a big emphasis put on mold, and fear put into people about mold. And I see on a lot of the forums, and I think it's something that we can delve into at some point when we talk about mold. Just to touch on it now, is that people are so fearful of it that it almost scares them away to a certain extent from curing, because you're not sure. And again, I relate it back to sort of my beginning at 15, 16 years ago, where I had nothing really to compare it with other than what was written on the pages of a book. And and when they talk about good mold, well, what is a good mold and what is a bad mold, and so forth. So I think that's something that we could really hone in on, particularly when we talk about mold, is just to give people some examples of what we are looking for and then what we're not looking for, and with a proviso, as you say very carefully, is even if it is a good mold but you don't think it is, it's better to err on the side of caution than it is to just go ahead without understanding what's going on until you can get some expert advice, because you can get really sick with certain molds anyway. But that's just touching on molds a little bit. I mean, obviously in your line of work, bacteria control is extremely important, in terms of, as you said, the spoilage, and then obviously using the bacteria to create the curing process, and the flavors and color, even color to a certain extent is brought about by the certain bacteria. So in your opinion, I mean, if we just again, let's start at the very beginning and just really break down what it is that we're looking at. What bacteria do we not want, and what bacteria do we want, and how do we get to managing that?
If we just step back into the world of microorganisms, microorganisms is something, especially in a country in a place like Africa, it's counterintuitive. For people to it's sometimes strange to say that there's things that we can't see, living organisms that may be more deadly than anything that we can see, and that is a greater threat. So just by that, just that fact on its own should make us sit up and just say, how do we handle personal hygiene? It's not necessarily the things that we see, but it's the things that we touch, and what continually come out of our nose, just to be gross about it. That's the reality of it. As you work over meat, and as you work with the meat, it is what we do when there's two things that we try and do when we talk about bacteria. The one is that we want to protect you from harmful bacteria and pathogens. But there's another very important thing that I want to say, in that is that in the meat curing environment, it's actually the other way around. It is the meat that we want to protect from us, because it is us. The meat, when you slaughter an animal, our meat is effectively it's sterile. There's nothing dirty about the meat. It's a sterile environment. There's no bacteria. And it is our working with that product that then brings it into contact with the micro world. Okay. And the micro world, just to give a step back, even in terms of that, the micro world was really discovered in the Greeks had some inkling of yeast, for example, that they exist, small little organisms. I forget the word that they called them. So from baking from bread industries, and even from the meat industry, they obviously saw that they knew there's something that converts the carbohydrates and the sugars into alcohol, for example, and carbon dioxide. So they could see that action, and they had an inkling that these are living organisms and that it's not a chemical reaction. So our understanding comes from the 1665, 1678, around that time span when the microscope was invented. And when people had the microscope and they could start Hooke and van Leeuwenhoek are the two big names there. When they started looking at it in 1663. There was a presentation done to the Royal Society where leeches were shown that were identified in vinegar and mold in sheepskin, and those were that was the start of understanding the activity of microorganisms, And so when we come to meat, it is us who introduce the microorganism to the meat. Yes. And we spoil the meat in a sense with our activity. One of the early things we spoke about was then the concept. We years ago when we started the meat factory, the bacon factory, we had a tremendous problem with micro on our meat. It came in with very high microbial loads, and this is something that the factories in Europe are unaccustomed to, because the standards are very good and they get very good quality. There's very low micro on the products when they come into the factory. So then I was introduced to the concept of actually washing the meat, and a way that you can, an easy, cheap way to wash the meat. If there's any doubt that the meat was anyway compromised with micro, it is just to take vinegar, which is acetic acid, and maybe dilute it 1-to-1 with water, and wash it. Just wash the meat. And the same thing goes. I personally like having those type of disinfectants available in the factory. So when I start working with the meat, I always have a bucket of acetic acid available, and I leave my knives in the bucket. And I don't work with the same knife throughout every couple of minutes I change the knife. So that's something that the home curer can even do. Just have a little bucket there, have 2 or 3 knives in there, and then every couple of minutes just rotate the knives, hone the blade again, put it back into the acetic acid or the vinegar, take it out again, start working with it. Because especially if you work with different types of different cuts of meat, it's not just one cut of meat you work with. The opportunity for cross-contamination is huge. Even if you put the knife down, there's an opportunity for what the surface that you put it down on may be contaminated. So very practically, that's something that and then with that goes hand washing. Every 20 minutes you should wash your hands, wash and sanitize. And wash it the old, everybody knows this. You sing happy birthday to you twice, as you wash your hands, and then because contact time is so important. This is something that I even teach small children, and you will see them sing happy birthday to themselves twice, even at school. Just it sounds so silly, but Gil, sorry for bringing it down to this level, but I think these are the important things. The right procedure of washing hands is to wet your hands first, right? Then apply the soap, then do the happy birthday to me twice, and at the same time, while you work every little area, on the hands specifically where there can be where the bacteria can hide it. Very important to pay a lot of attention to the nails. When you wash your hands.
Yes.
Right. And then, thorough drying the hands. Right. And then disinfecting it. And make sure that you don't, after this, now go and dig in your ear or dig in your nose, sorry for that, or scratch your bum or whatever the case may be, which completely defeats the purpose. The moment when you do that, go and wash your hands again. In fact, in the, to do the procedure that we have in the factory, is that whenever you open a box, whenever you touch a foreign product, whenever you carry a bag, whenever you touch that, you will always put it down and go and wash your hands before you do anything else. So there's a continuous washing of the hands. And then while we're on that topic, there was I saw a little informal study that was done by a medical graduate, and he studied the efficacy of air drying versus using a paper towel to dry your hands. And he found that surgeons will do a lot better if they would use paper towels to wash their hands compared to air drying their hands.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah, there's little things like that. We almost can't be too fanatical about micro. And I was reading. I was doing a lot of work this weekend on the early history of dry curing of the. Let me say it like this: the early history of tank curing in England. Where did that come from? And I was reminded when I was reading a lot of research on the subject, the primitive environments that our forefathers used to cure their meat in. So this becomes pertinent to the issue of botulism, which you bring up, which is absolutely a very good point. And botulism is a priority organism in the meat curing industry, because botulism is the reason why we cure meat with nitrites.
Yes.
Botulism. We spoke a little bit about the anti-vaxxers and stuff earlier, but botulism is almost a similar type of disease that we forget what meat curing and food preparation looked like in the 1920s, and we don't necessarily we in our modern era we don't have an appreciation for the unbelievably filthy environment that existed in the kitchen and in factories in those days. So botulism is your Clostridium botulinum, which is the organism that we talk about, which causes botulism. It secretes certain toxins, and some of them are extreme. Some of them are the most dangerous toxins on Earth. There's some authors that say that a couple of milliliters of toxin is toxic enough to wipe out the entire human race.
Yeah, just a point on that. Toxic. Yeah, I've read somewhere that it's probably the most toxic toxin that we have is the botulinum toxin.
That's true. It is the most toxic substance on Earth.
Yeah. So whilst I mean, botulism is something that is very rare to get these days. It's just not worth taking a chance. So I just want to make that point. Yeah.
Yes, that is. But that is exactly the point. So botulism became a very big thing when there was a banker in New York who if I recall correctly, I think they ate soup, and his wife and he the banker got it, and he passed away, and his wife she almost passed away. She was very ill as well. And that put the whole issue of botulism, to the fore. Botulism, of course, it was associated with sausages in Germany, and it was first identified as a sausage poison. It used to be called, and because it was prevalent. Now, one of the things one of the reasons why it was so prevalent was just because of the hygienic conditions. Soil. It's the botulism lives in the soil. The botulinum Clostridium lives in the soil, and if you're going to contaminate any area with soil, you stand a chance to bring Clostridium into the picture, which will be fatal. And one of the only things that the problem with Clostridium is that it forms endospores. Right now, of all the bacteria, not all bacteria form endospores, but Clostridium is one of them that forms endospores. And an endospore, it is not like a seed. It's a, just by way of illustrating it, let's use the analogy, understanding that the analogy is not actually not 100% accurate, but it is like a very hard nut. The organism can be killed, but then it retreats into this type of state where it protects itself. And the thing is that whenever not heat, not radiation, nothing can penetrate and disrupt that spore that was formed. And if the right conditions again exist in the future, it will, let's use the term germinate, but it's obviously the wrong term, but let's use that for this, because everybody knows what germination of seeds look like. It will germinate again, and it will form endospores again, and it will start doing its toxin formation again almost immediately. As soon as it starts its metabolism, as soon as it starts eating, it secretes its toxin. And so that toxin, the problem with that is the extremely high level of the toxicity. You just need to get a very, very minuscule amount of that, and it's got the potential to kill you. And one of the substances is then one of the only substances on Earth that is able to destroy that endospore is then or disrupt it is a little bit of salt in combination with nitrites. Okay. And this brings me to a very important thing, because a lot of people out there, when you read scientific literature of people who claim that they found something else, they say you don't have to cure meat because there's another preservative that you can use that can kill Clostridium botulinum. Sure, maybe it's got the ability to kill the bacteria, but what about how will it handle the endospores that was formed by the organism? Yes. The microbes always respond when we come and we try to eliminate them. This is something general to remember. They always respond. It is like they respond in a number of ways. They either form biofilm, which in a simple way you can say it's a colony of bacteria that feel that they need to protect themselves, and so they pull this canopy over themselves, and they and they seal it on the sides. Very simplistically put, but the picture is there. And you now run soap or disinfectants or whatever over it. They're completely protected from the soap, and they can come out at any point in time, and they can start doing their thing again. So microorganisms respond. So this is one of the reasons why I say that just taking a dirty cloth, for example, a cloth is in any case something that should generally be banned from a kitchen if you're going to work with meat. But if cloth, because it spreads bacteria, that's the reason why I say that. It holds water, and water, moist and warmth. That is what bacteria needs to multiply. And you get busy with something, and that cloth is sitting there somewhere on the kitchen table, and now you take it because there's blood, and you wipe the blood up with that, and you leave it there again. You don't rinse that out properly and disinfect it properly and go through all the different steps, maybe boil it again or whatever. So it's far easier. I'm going to give you a little. I'll give you a little hint there that will be very good advice for curers and managers. When you start working with the meat, before you work with the meat, you want to do your cleaning. Clean the surfaces, clean your knives, put it in the little disinfectant containers that you have ready with it. You have everything set out. Do your preparation. Thoroughly clean the surface with a proper soap, and then after that you want to dry it. You want to make sure the environment is dry, and then you want to apply the disinfectant. Because if the environment is still wet when you apply the disinfectant, you dilute the disinfectant, and that is what you don't want to do. Because if you give microorganisms half a chance, now you take the ability to kill the microorganism away. Now you only make them angry, if I can use that terminology. Obviously they don't think in those terms, but now they form resistance, and now they know what's coming, and they prepare themselves for it, and it makes it harder to kill them, right? So even in those couple of minutes of doing the preparation of the kitchen, you can mess it up right there. Do your preparation. So you wash first. You remove all obvious debris. Then you do the soaping, right? Contact time also is very important. So you want to apply the soap, you want to leave it a little bit there, and you want to rinse it off, right? You want to dry the area, make sure it's dry. Don't use a dirty cloth for that, but make sure it's dry. Open the windows. Then you want to apply the disinfectant. Right? Now you can start using the meat. I always use a food grade disinfectant, so I can immediately start. I spray on the surface, and then immediately I put the meat on top of that, and boom, I get going. But from that moment, you work with a dry environment. You leave water off. You don't clean as you go in terms of taking a cloth and wiping up blood. It's something that our parents taught us, and it's a little bit counterintuitive, but it is definitely a better way of doing it. You want to keep the environment completely dry, right? If a piece of meat now falls on the floor, right, you leave it on the floor. If something falls on a paper towel blows onto the floor of the table, you leave it on the floor. You don't pick things up from the floor, and you're careful not to handle too many things. You don't put the kettle on now and make yourself some coffee while you're working on those kind of things. You focus on working with the meat now. Then you do all your work. You complete your work. You put your knives back in the sterilizing solution. You take your cutting boards, maybe even that's another huge area for contamination. You put that in a sterilizing solution, maybe chlorine, if you want to be that focused about the matter, which is a very good thing to do. Right? And then once everything is put away, then you start cleaning again with water. Now it can be wet again. Now you start and you do the same thing again. The very simple process is you remove physical debris. Right, that's step one. Step two is you apply the soap. You rinse. Right, then you apply the soap. You leave it for contact time. You let it dry. However you do that, you may get some of those squeegees and stuff, which is a very good way just to get the table dry. Right, once it's dry, then you spray the disinfectant, and then okay, now I've done my job. Then in between, obviously, after that, you're going to go and thoroughly wash your hands. So before you start, after you clean. You're gonna throughout the process. You're gonna rinse your hands thoroughly, soap wash and disinfect. Soap wash and disinfect. There's no point in just soap wash without disinfecting. And the importance of remember all the places that the bacteria can hide. So that's in terms of your kitchen or factory discipline. It's basically the same thing.
Yeah, before we carry on, but there's a couple of things there. So, like I do, I relate it back to the home carer because that's who I'm talking to. You and so there's a few things that I want to highlight here, and this actually got highlighted to me. I sent you a little text that one of our viewers sent me, just thanking us for the videos and the fact that we don't necessarily go into too much of this. We're not scientists, but we understand what needs to be done and why. And he just highlighted it to me, and I've actually been thinking a lot about it, where a lot of people who do this, particularly Europeans, essentially, whether they were immigrants to America or South Africa or wherever, they have some Italian or some Spanish ancestry. And I mean, even in Italy, you read all these books and all that, and this is how my great-grandfather and my great-great-great-grandfather used to do it, because they've been curing meat in their families for generations. And this guy, I've met this guy before on one of the forums, and I know what he was referring to because on one of the questions somebody asked, a person with Italian ancestry came on and said, yeah, he doesn't bother with all of this because his grandma never used to bother with all of this. And I'm not relating it directly to cleaning. It was to do with something else. But I think there is an attitude that, they all survived, so botulism isn't a problem. And I also read another one where the guy says, about 20 people die of botulism in Italy in a year. But that's 20 people too many. Somebody didn't clean their process properly, and somebody got botulism. That's the problem, and that somebody could be you. You could be making that meat,
yes, and
your son or your daughter or the friend that you give the piece of meat to could get that botulism. That's the seriousness of it, and I relate it back. I actually wrote on this forum. I related it back to driving a vehicle. It's fairly simple. When I jump in my car and I drive down to the shop a kilometer away, I put my safety belt on. It's 5 million to 1 that I'm going to have an accident, but I still do it. Why do I do it? Just in case I have the accident. So that's the same thing, and this regimen needs to be applied. The point is, with this sort of thing, and I think this is one thing that home curers need to be very careful of, is yes, the few notable things that you've mentioned there is that we use water in our kitchen. So, you know, when I'm cooking, I take a cloth, I wipe it up, and I carry on. And it immediately sparked a thought in me about our discussion last week on water activity. Now we're managing water activity in meat, and now we're introducing water into us. So if we can, so now it actually becomes not counterintuitive, because now we understand that water is where the bacteria proliferates, and if we're introducing water all the time, the chances are much. And I think you also mentioned last week how people used to put carcasses in water to make them rot. Why did they not just leave them out? They introduced it into the water because there was, you know, it was great for bacteria growth. So I think it becomes, if you make that realization in your mind, then it no longer becomes counterintuitive. I mean, just a few items there that you mentioned. Don't have a cloth, and I see a lot of people, they've always got a cloth with them, because we see the chefs in TV shows, they've constantly got a cloth with them. But we've also got to realize that what chefs are doing is they're cooking, so they're heating those foods to a level where those bacteria are either completely neutralized and it has no effect, or they're killed to that extent. Whereas in a charcuterie kitchen, we're not. The things are staying raw. So now it makes sense to me, and so therefore, I mean, I always used to, when we had our kitchen as well, and even here, I've got big wads of paper towel. So if I need to wipe something, I've got a paper. If I need to wipe my hands, I wipe it with paper towel. And as you say, don't introduce water to your thing. The other thing I just wanted to go back to as well is your regimen of how you use your utensils, and just going through the stages of get rid of debris, then wash. And obviously, when you're talking about washing, what do you recommend people to wash their surfaces with, and that sort of thing? I mean, obviously it's got to be food grade, but I mean, initially you mentioned a vinegar water solution. Just give us an idea of what you would suggest that home curers would use, and people who are, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, there are quite a lot of artisan curers who now have kitchens. It's born out of their hobby and their passion, and now they've got a kitchen where they're producing charcuterie for commercial usage. So what would you? And there's another just anecdote that I want to get to on that, on the whole safety and thing using gloves. But just if we can deal with that question first, regarding the what sort of solution should we use to wash our knives and our cutting boards? And I also want to talk about cutting boards, by the way, but knives and surfaces and that sort of thing.
Yeah, the rule of thumb is if you're going to use work with food, you want something that doesn't have a flavor. Where they flavor these things that our kitchens can smell nice as well. But we want to buy cleaning liquids, cleaning chemicals that does not leave a smell. And the use of organic acids, I really like it, because it's a natural. It's something that goes very well with food in any case. So vinegar. It's going to do the job in terms of getting rid of a lot of the pathogens. Vinegar is acetic acid is a very good. If you don't have anything else, use vinegar, and then obviously I would actually use any good soap, as long as there's not a smell to the soap.
Okay.
There's try and find one without the smell. If you have nothing else, and the only thing that you have is scented soaps, it's better to use the scented soap, and then just to make sure that the area after you used it is dry, and that there's none of the smells left, and those kind of things. That is better than not using anything at all. The concern is just that you transfer some of that smell onto the food, which is obviously not gonna be what you. Industrially, there's a whole host of cleaning chemicals available. A lot of them are frightfully expensive, just because of the food grade nature of them. For the home curer, I would stick to your basic cleaning that you would use to clean your ovens and your tabletops and those kind of things with. But I would use vinegar quite liberally in the process.
So the best would be to get a nice big sort of bottle of spirit vinegar and dilute it 1-to-1, you say, with water.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, just to make it about a 5% acetic acid solution. I think vinegar is 10%. I'll check on that. But I think it's 10%.
Okay.
So you can get away with a 5%. Of course, chlorine is if you have a swimming pool, you have chlorine, and if there's grouting or anything like that in the kitchen, I would definitely, if I'm going to work with meat there, I would use chlorine to clean those in the where the grouting is, and give a little bit extra attention to that. Or if there's old wooden surfaces, which is not to work meat on, because the food, the juices of the meat and the bacteria absorbs, and it becomes a vector for spreading of bacteria. But I would definitely not shy away from giving it a good scrub with chlorine. Now, as I say that, there's a whole lot of food scientists who may watch this and having heart attacks as I say that, because it's not the most environmentally friendly product to use, but it works phenomenally well. And if you want to make sure that you do a good job, I worked in a very old factory once, and we couldn't get the micro under control. And every single night when we left, I just sprinkled chlorine on the floor, and it was an old floor, and there was a food safety auditor that came, and this guy was convinced he's going to catch me out, and he was doing his test, and he said, "I will show you how dirty this floor is," and he couldn't find a single spot where there was bacteria. So it works.
Okay, so your mention of the wooden table, that brings me to I alluded to that, or mentioned that I wanted to talk about cutting boards, and that brings me to cutting boards. And again, just relating it back to my earlier story about how my grandfather's, grandmother's, uncle's, auntie used to do it. I mean, in typical old style kitchens, they didn't have stainless steel tabletops and that sort of thing. So this is one thing I do want to recommend home curers, if you've got enough space. I mean, again, it's a toss up between how much space you've got and how much obviously you got to manage. And like in my kitchen, there's not much I can do. I live in an apartment now, and I've got my kitchen is probably 3 meters by 3 meters, so it's not very big. So I kind of, but it's got proper melamine, smooth top surfaces. But if I do, and a lot of people have, particularly in places like the US, a lot of the old houses still have, they call it a basement, a cellar, or a basement. And they use these basements then to start curing, or people convert their garages. That's what I did when I started. When I started curing at first, I started working in my garage. I converted my garage, and there's a few things that one needs to consider. Is that before you even start with that, you need to clean the environment completely. So, and I've seen some photographs where the guys have got their drilling machines and their woodworking tools in the back, and then they're making meat. For me, that is a no-no. You can't do that. You can't work food in an environment where you're doing your other hobbies like woodworking and that sort of thing, because those dusts, it just causes problems. So I get it that people have a space issue, but then cordon off a section where you're going to work your meat and make sure that it's completely guarded from the rest. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is invest in a stainless steel table. Even if it's just a small little desk, they're not expensive, and they're so much easier to keep clean. But if you don't, or if you can't, like in my kitchen, I can't get a stainless steel table in, or somebody else, they've got an old basement where there's a wooden bench or whatever it is. Then one needs to go and get yourself some food grade industrial chopping boards, and you need to again, Eben, you would be able to attest to this, but you have chopping boards for specific things. If you're working with organic material or plant-based material, you use a chopping board. And if you're using with meat, then you use a different, and you never contaminate, or you never cross-contaminate those or cross-use those chopping boards. And again, if you go to commercial kitchens, restaurants, and other commercial kitchens, they'll actually color the boards, and specific colored boards are used for specific. I'm not a professional chef, so I don't know. I can't remember exactly. I think the white ones are used for meat, and there's green ones are used for. I don't know. You know what I'll do is I'll actually look it up before, as I can't remember. But you don't need to do this at home. You don't need to use this. You can just get a whole bunch of. I like using a whiteboard. That's my preference. And then you just write on it on the back and just say meat. If you're going to use vegetables when you chop your onions or whatever, one is for vegetables, and so forth. And I would also suggest that people get 3 or 4 different ones for meat. And as you say, when you're working with one cut of meat, use one chopping board. You don't always want to then go and wash, because, as you said, you don't want to contaminate. So have your boards ready so that you process your meat. And it's interesting. I did a video this over the weekend for my book. Just talking about, making sure that you've got 2 or 3 sets of knives available. So it actually dovetails really nicely with what you're saying. And go and get yourself 3 or 4 butcher's knives and boning knives and everything. And as you say, have them in that solution. Let them lie there. Take a new one, and when you're finished with it, dump it in another box so that you don't use it. But I just want to emphasize the thing of the cutting boards. And I also tend to look for cutting boards that have a smooth surface. You sometimes get these cutting boards that have little grip marks on them so that the meat doesn't slide. And I found that when you're working with raw meat, again, it's not so much a problem if you're going to go and sear that meat, but in our situation, we're not cooking the meat. So we're working with the meat, and then we take that board and we clean it. But, sometimes little bits of the meat still, micro bits of the meat get stuck on those little ribs, and you can't get them out, and you put it in and dry, and then you've got that issue. So try and get as smoother a surface chopping board as you can find. It's okay if the one side is a little bit rough, because that then helps it not slide on the desk, but that's also easy. You just get a dry cloth, just damp it slightly, and put your chopping board on that, and it doesn't move around. So those are just a few things that I've observations that I've made from what you've said that dovetails into sort of what my beliefs are. And for the home curer is 3 or 4 sets of knives, couple of chopping boards, nice big chopping boards. I mean, you can go, it doesn't have to go to your local supermarket and get these little tiny chopping boards that that you would use to chop onions. I mean, I hate them. You need a nice sort of almost a meter chopping board by a meter, nice big, so that you can work the meat and nothing falls off on the sides and that sort of thing. You don't have the cross contamination or the blood dripping everywhere. It all stays probably on the chopping board. So that to me is fairly important.
Gil, that's brilliant. If I can just come in there on that. There's some people obviously that absolutely swears by wooden chopping boards, because the wood closes up again if you make a cut, and if it's a plastic type of variety, it will stay open and create a vector for bacterial proliferation. That may be or may not be it's there's good points too, and for both arguments. The point is just though that don't keep your chopping board too long. If it's past its sell-by date, get rid of it. Get a new one. They're not that
lots
expensive.
Of cuts on it, and just get rid of it. They're not. They're cheap. I mean, they're much cheaper than wooden chopping boards. And get yourself a nice thick one, half an inch. A
nice thick.
Because it's nice and sturdy.
Yes.
So that
otherwise they slide all over the place.
Yes.
You know, with I mean, with that we can another discipline that which should be standard. You know, but a lot of people don't do that. Is that if you're going to use any equipment, you know, whether it's a mixer or some kind of a chopping device or whatever, if you're going to use a small grinder or a small filler or whatever, when you clean that thing at the end of the day, strip it down as much you can. If there's you know, have a little tool set handy where you can undo the screws and the bolts, strip it down as much as you can, and for grinders and things like that, I would even put that overnight in a chlorine solution and leave it there just to make absolutely sure that you get rid of it. Remember, contact time in terms of getting rid of bacteria. That's the key thing. You want to make absolutely sure that there is no way that they can survive, and you know, if 2 or 3 hours will definitely kill them, leave it in there overnight. It's not going to harm anybody, provided of course that it doesn't rust or whatever. You don't want rust on your equipment, but strip down as much as you can, to as far as you can, even go further than you think you. Yeah, you know, I've seen many grinders and various cutting devices and slicers and you name it from in kitchens, and I see when that comes in to be reconditioned or to be revamped or whatever the case may be, and the technician opens it up, and you think, my goodness, you know, where did that come from? I'll never go to that restaurant ever in my life again.
No, yeah, I've got a story on that where I bought a second-hand piece of equipment and opened it up, and it was beautifully clean on the outside. And I opened it up, and the cockroaches that were inside it, is unbelievable. And this guy must have not understood where the hell these cockroaches were coming from, but because his machine was beautifully cleaned and, you know, all the components, but inside it the motor generates enough heat to make it comfortable so you got to be careful also with what you purchase. You know, where you purchase your equipment is very important, because that, I mean, all of that becomes a problem. But just going back to that point of yours where you say, you know, unscrew the little screws. I mean, meat gets in everywhere. So it's like sand. It's unbelievable. If you know, I mean, with sausage presses and all that, where the springs are and all that sort of thing, it's unbelievable when you undo that. You think it's a sealed part, and then you find meat inside there, and you leave that meat there. Within a week, it's off, and it causes huge problems.
That's absolutely. Absolutely, and that's why I say take a bucket and dunk the whole thing in there, just to make absolutely sure that you don't miss a spot. I'll give you another very, very good bit of advice. And that is that if you buy second-hand equipment, a piece of equipment, whatever the nature may be, let's say there's no complicated electronics or anything like that can be damaged. But a very good thing to do is put that in your oven and bake it 180 degrees for an hour or two. You know, there's no bacteria that's going to survive that. You know, zap it in the oven. Bake the hell out of that thing, you know, to make sure there's no way that it can survive. I can't overemphasize this enough. You know, you make a very good point in terms of the perception, how casual we are in terms of hygiene in the kitchen. Again, remember, you go back to botulinum. Botulinum is an issue in home preparations. But I will be. There's a botulinum commission in the EU and in America, and they report on. It's online. One can find it every year. You can see exactly who got botulinum and how they contracted it. And I'll be surprised if there's a single instance of botulinum that they got from a commercial factory. Almost invariably it comes from home curing. Home curing and soups, canning, absolutely. Home canning of soups, a big issue, you know. And so you play with the lives of your family, and that is so important. Sure, you can get away with it. You maybe can get away with it with your entire life, and your son takes it over from you, and him and his family eats it, and they pass away. Is that something that you want to your conscience? You know, you're making that decision.
Yeah, it's that. It's yeah, but only 20 people. But it's 20 people, and they
Yes.
just
Yeah, they've got families.
with the right regimen, those 20 people needn't have died. You know, that's the bottom line.
There's
Somewhere
no
along
reason.
the line, somebody made a mistake. So I mean, this, and I'm grateful that I didn't realize we were going to. Again, it's the great thing about our chats, Eben, is that we sort of follow the rabbit holes and we get to places we didn't expect.
Yes.
And I'm actually very happy that we got to this whole scenario, because I think it's a big issue with home cure is the fact that, you know what, it's not so serious, and it is. It's dire.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably the most important step in curing is hygiene. I know that you mentioned in the last chat, you know, you either do it or you don't, but with the emphasis on do it. You know, don't you know?
Do it.
Firstly, definitely do not do a half job, but you know, make sure. And the steps are. Sorry, I just what I have been wanting to ask you is, in terms of cleaning, most domestic kitchens these days have a dishwasher. You know, I've heard for and against using a dishwasher to you know. So once you've minced your meat and you take your grinder parts, put it in the dishwasher because it gets that intense steam heat. Is that would that be a regimen that you would suggest people follow or not?
I would do that as if you want it. It can be one of many steps.
Yes. Okay.
You can make one, but it should by no means be. I'm not going to clean it myself because
because you got to stretch in and you got to get into the little grooves and everything. So you've got to do
absolutely.
Yeah. So the steaming would help. Yeah.
Yes.
But but
it is too uncontrolled. I don't like it. It's too uncontrolled. You don't see what's happening there, and you can't really work the areas. I mean, I want to go back to the listeriosis pandemic that we had in South Africa, because that taught us a whole lot of things, you know. And one of the things is I started becoming aware of. I hear stories such as, I'll give you an example. There was a factory, I can't remember. It's not in South Africa. It's either in North America or in Europe, where they couldn't. One of the big brand names out there, big producers, battled with listeriosis. They could not get rid of listeria in the factory, and they did everything. And there was an old meat grinder in the factory that they still used, and they cleaned that meat grinder to the point where the engineers disassembled the meat grinder, and they kept on finding listeria. In fact, I remember now who the company is. I won't mention the name, but it's a big English. They in South Africa as well, a big company. They, at the end of the day, out of desperation, took the parts where they kept finding the listeria, and they gave that to the engineering department. They grind it down with angle grinders, every conceivable part of that piece of equipment, and they send it back. They tested it. They didn't immediately find something again, but as they continued to test it, maybe they didn't test at exactly the right spot, but it was still there. Right? At the end of the day, they took all the working parts where they continued to find positive for listeria, and they actually replaced it with brand new parts. And only then were they able to get rid of listeria from that machine. So the tenacity of these organisms and their ability to hide and to protect themselves from our most aggressive measures that we take to get rid of them. This is actually a very good example of how tenacious they are, and the extent that we must go to in order to eradicate them. Now, I want to tell just a quick story. Again, as you say, you know, I take the liberty because it's the, you know, we have this freedom to continue down rabbit trails. You know, the listeria even was in South Africa. Not you know, I attended a number of seminars on listeria, obviously, and the one that made biggest impact on me was they at the beginning of the seminar they had a 3 minutes or a minute of silence for the people who passed away from it, and I thought it's a little bit over the top. It's melodramatic. I didn't like it, you know. And then we did they had speakers, wonderful speakers from overseas and locals who became experts in listeria, and we did the whole conference. And at the end of the conference, they brought on a journalist, and she put on the screen. She started putting on just a grandmother. We spoke about your mom, who's in her 80s. The people like you and me. They're the grandmother, and she would introduce them and say, "This is Mrs. So and so. She was 86 years old. She bought a ham from this and this store. 2 days later, she started getting sick. She passed away on this date." And face after face after face, they kept putting these names and the faces of the people up, and I could not believe it, because all of a sudden it became very real to me.
Yeah,
and then the most surprising part of that whole thing is the lady the lady who's running the company, who do the presentation. She's a eminent food scientist in South Africa. She came on and then she said, she told the story where, and not giving her name, but I want to share her story. She was giving her son got, he was battling from a recurring flu, and they couldn't figure out what's happening, and she didn't think too much about it. And as a food scientist, you can imagine all the hygiene and all the precautions at their home were being taken and everything. And she was lecturing on Listeria to one of the food companies. And in the middle of the lecture, she said to them, "My God, I just realized my son's got Listeria." And because she went through the symptoms, and then she rushed him to hospital in Johannesburg. She was going to a couple of hospitals. Nobody wanted to test for listeriosis. And at the end of the day, she found somebody who tested for it. He tested positive. He had listeriosis, and he's been battling. He got severely sick. He was hospitalized and battled to get better, and is better now. But it's stories like that which completely changed my view about food science, about microbiology and cleaning, because we actually want to discuss the beautiful aromas that molds can and the wonderful ally that yeast is in our preparations of food. And yes, maybe what we must do is schedule a second session just to focus on this because bacteria, microbes, in terms of cleaning, that becomes the main thing. And if the foundation is there, and we're not going to get our family sick, and we can actually whether the food tastes good or not, I would say that's a secondary consideration. The first consideration is whatever we do, let's do it safely. If you have small children, if you have children, if you have a family, imagine your grandmother or your mother who's in her 80s or in her 70s, somebody older, come and eat some of the ham, and she would get sick and get listeriosis. I saw statistics that all of us, on average, get infected with listeria or get sick from it once or twice a year. I think it's twice a year, twice or even 3 times a year. But the fact is, our immune systems are just so strong that we think, I had a little bit of an upset stomach this weekend. I don't know, maybe something I ate or whatever. Well, it may be a mild form of listeriosis. And now when you come and you talk about people with compromised immune systems, it's a completely different story now. Now I didn't have a problem with that. Yeah, well, you better be grateful that your mother didn't eat that or your father didn't eat that. They could have passed away from that with compromised immune system, with age, and all these kind of things becoming an issue. So the thing that struck me was just how run of the mill, normal, average, everyday people that we rub shoulders with, lawyers, dentists, food scientists, these are the people who passed away from listeriosis in the South African pandemic. It was not as I initially thought would be the poorest of the poor with compromised immune system. These are people who's just a little bit older, and that was the only thing, and that's something which their kids would have eaten and have no problem with it, and they passed away from it. So the figures from people who get sick from foodborne diseases around the world, it's one of these it's one of these figures where you think when you read it, it can't be. It is in the millions. It is like the percentages are so. I'll see if I can find the statistics somewhere. It's the opening of a food science textbook somewhere. But it's really surprising, So this is absolutely, I think, a timely and a very good discussion to be having today.
Yeah, and I think just again there, I think the focus is predominantly put on the prevention of botulism. And I think, like you say, there's listeriosis, there's E. coli. I mean, there's hordes and hordes of different foodborne diseases that we don't even consider. And just by following that little regimen of making sure that your environment is clean, just takes out the risk of getting any of those sort of foodborne diseases at all, not just botulism. We're talking about a whole host of different things. I mean, you know, again, you don't forget about getting a serious disease. You don't want to spend the weekend huddled over a toilet bowl being sick because you had a piece of meat that you made. Sorry, I just wanted to reverse back again. We spoke about the cleanliness of the kitchen, and the one thing that you did mention, which I wanted to just raise earlier, but I didn't get to it, was cleaning the meat. And again, you know, a lot of charcutiers will, oh no, but you shouldn't do anything. You know, the meat's fresh and whatever. But I think, you know, for me, it's a simple thing. The one thing I do with any meat that I get is I do freeze it to below 17 degrees Celsius, just to get rid of, you know, any possible issues like trichiosis or anything like that. As much as it's come from a abattoir where a vet has checked it for all that, or measles or whatever it is, but you know, freeze it, and you've just got that sense of comfort. But just in terms of the washing of the meat, just explain your process there, please, Eben, just so that you know, again, if I'm going to make a copper or a ham or a piece of bacon or whatever it is, or a pancetta, what do I do with that meat? What is the best process there in terms of washing the meat?
So what I used to do is I would just take a solution of acetic acid, like I said, vinegar, and I would literally just dunk it into the bucket and just shake it a little bit, and that's all you. And then you remove it and you put it on a table. If it's a single piece of meat that I'm going to work with, I will pat it dry. But that little bit of the shaking, just the movement of the molecules over the surface of the meat will, in any case, knock a lot of the bacteria off.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. Especially if there's been any chance for it to be contaminated or compromised at all in the process. You know, maybe the guy at the store didn't wash his hands properly or whatever. Especially in the home curing environment, I think it's the big danger. Your big factories normally have very good procedures in place. You know, the handling of the meat's done very professionally. But if it's done by somebody who doesn't handle it every single day, you want to make sure that meat is clean to begin with. You know, shake it around a little bit and pat it dry, and then you can use it. If you get a carcass for the home curer who's fortunate enough to butcher his own animals, and you're going to slaughter a pig, your chances for contamination is going to come mainly from the hide. The hide is the dirtiest part of the animal, and if you handle the hide, for the chances for contamination to come onto the carcass and to become a problem, then you know, and then if the carcass, the pig is hanging on its hind legs, you know, as the blood runs down, you know, obviously the areas of contamination is going to be the blood around the neck, you know, on the inside of the carcass where the blood is going to run down. Yes. There's a great story that of a friend of mine tells me, who was trying to combat bacterial contamination of his pork carcasses in a fairly large deboning plant in South Africa. And he had all kinds of consultants in to come and advise him on why the carcasses are contaminated, and they couldn't find the reason. And as he walked, he was one day he worked a little bit late, and he was at the time down on the factory floor when he was not normally on the factory floor at that time. And he saw one of the cleaners walking past, and there was some blood running down the carcass on the side of the carcass. And the cleaner saw this, and he took a bucket of water, and he threw the water on the carcass just to get rid of that blood. Now, what the cleaner didn't know is that the intestines are normally put in that bucket. So he thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's contaminating the whole carcass with what he's doing now. So because hygiene of hygienically slaughter of the animal, the dressing of the carcass is so important. It may be a good idea. And I've got there's some on my site. I think there's some pictures up of simple home systems that you can make, where you can create a spray system. Even if you use these garden weed sprayers that you put on your back and you pump it. If you put some organic acid in there and you spray that over the carcass to make sure. And again, the most important thing. So begin at the top, right, and spray all the way to the bottom. Why at the top? Because it will start running down.
Yes.
And the biggest problem is going to be at the bottom of the carcass, and then the contact time will be the biggest at the bottom of the carcass as well. So there's very easy ways. The internet there's a couple of very good systems available. You can use, and they also recommend all the different organic acids that you can use for the spray. But very effective, a very good thing to do is just to clean the carcasses before you actually start working with the carcass, before you start boning it and opening it up. And while we talk about that, obviously the importance of, for example, bandsaws. Another big area of contamination is through bandsaws. But if you work with the carcass, the height is something that you want to be particularly careful of, and maybe you want to decontaminate that carcass before you start working it.
Okay, and that then just again, one of the things that we look for in charcuterie when we slaughter or when we source our meat is that we want the meat to be as fresh as possible, and there's a variety of reasons for this. Generally, we hang meat for the lactic acids to activate, so that then tenderizes the meat to a certain extent, and that's why butchers will often, and that's also why we dry age things like steak and that sort of thing. But in terms of charcuterie, we don't want that to take place, firstly. Secondly, the other reason why we don't want to hang the meat for too long is we're not going to be cooking it again, so it minimizes any contamination or bacteria that gets onto the meat in that process. And that then just brings me to another point, because obviously, for the home curer, we're not working generally with carcasses. I mean, as you say, if you're fortunate enough to have a facility where you can, or a big enough space where you can, and again, I've said it in the book that I've just finished, that if the best possible solution, or the best form or source of meat that you can get, is to go directly to a farmer that has either been licensed to butcher and sell directly to the public, which is not very often, or like what I did was I had a relationship with a farmer where I purchased whole pigs from him and we worked through an abattoir. And then, the one thing with an abattoir is it goes through the correct processes in terms of its cleanliness and its checking and all that sort of stuff. And then get that whole carcass as quickly as possible to your house or to your facility where you're going to be breaking it down. And then because then that whatever you're working with is as little there's as little contamination as possible. You often go to butchers or even in supermarkets, and they're busy cutting up meat, and then the phone rings because a customer or whatever, or somebody's calling you to the front, and then you leave the meat there and you walk away and you come back 10 minutes later or 5 minutes later or whatever it is, or you go on your tea break. People they don't think about this sort of thing. And then you buy that piece of meat and then you go and take that home, and then so the regimen, particularly if you're going to be buying from a butcher or a supermarket directly, then I would follow Eben's philosophy of dunking that meat into that vinegar solution, because you don't know how long that meat's been lying there. And again, I emphasize this. And for me, it's part of the fun of this whole art form is to build the relationship with the source where I source my meat, whether that be the butcher, whether that be the farmer, or whoever I'm going to be sourcing my meat from. But I can then start educating that person on how I want the meat. And And for me, that's extremely important. And that then gets rid of another form of cross-contamination that you might possibly get. I just see often people boast about, wow, they got this neck at a 30% discount, and it's, oh geez, what a great deal. And I need to highlight this to people. I get it that you want to get a deal, and that deal is fine if you're going to cut that up and make a stew with it, or you're going to put it on the barbecue and you're going to grill it, because then you know you're getting rid of any bacteria. But there's a reason why the supermarket or the butcher or whoever is putting that on special, is they're wanting to get rid of it and still get some money for it. And that is because it's probably close to its sell-by date. It's been in the shop now for a few days or a week, and they haven't sold that piece of meat, and that's why they put it on special. I would never touch a meat that's on special. That's something that I would absolutely never do. Again, it all comes down to what one can afford and what you can't afford. But if you're going to dry cure, I certainly wouldn't look at purchasing meats that have been put on special. If you're going to make fresh sausage, whether you're going to grill or something like that, different story, because you're getting rid of any contamination through the cooking process. But if you're going to make dry cured sausages, not a chance. There's no ways I'm buying meat that's been on special. And again, it's for no other reason than that you don't know where that meat's been lying, how long it's been lying for, and what bacteria are on that. So that to me is extremely important, and I cannot overemphasize the fact that you need to build up a relationship with the person that you're obtaining the meat from. And I know that in cities particularly, it's very difficult, because in most Western cultures or most Western countries, we have this propensity to drive towards the supermarket regime, where it's convenience and quick processed and easy to get. We don't have the, as they call it in the UK, the high street, where you've got your butcher and your baker and your candlestick maker, and you go and you buy each.
Yes,
And
yes.
I mean, here in Europe, in Poland, it's different. You do still have that to a certain extent. But in the US and Canada and the UK and places like South Africa, the supermarket is the place where you go, and very rarely do you find butcheries in cities. If you're going to make the effort to cure, you're going to take a year and a half to cure a ham. Make sure you source the right ham. And if that means that you've got to jump in your vehicle and drive out of town and find, or out of the city and find a little town around outside where there's a butcher, you'll find butchers, you'll find all over. Google it. Organic butchers dealing with organic meat, or great pigs, or whatever it is. Do your homework on this, and that's part of the fun. And build up that relationship with that butcher so that you can get the best possible quality of meat that you can. Number one, for the flavor. Number two, to know that it's spent as little time as possible from on the field to basically on your dressing table where you're busy breaking it down. But the other thing, I did mention it earlier. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the usage of gloves, latex gloves. Now, when we had the shop, the health inspector came out to come and give us they did their first inspection to just come and have a look, and then they came out to do a second inspection. And when they were there, we had boxes of latex gloves, and she was of the opinion that we shouldn't use latex gloves. And this was in this municipality, this region. They followed a study where people, and it's a psychological thing. People who wear latex gloves, and I'm not saying I'm for, but it's a discussion we need to have. So what they said was that the usage of latex gloves had a psychological trigger in people to think that it's clean. So they pick things, as you say, don't pick things up off the floor. They pick things up off the floor with their glove, or they do whatever, and then they're not washing their hands because they've got gloves on. And then they carry on working, and they found that they had a lot of contamination where there was the use of latex gloves. Now, I know one has to work according to, and particularly if you're going to be selling the meat, but I would go as far as to say as if you're going to be giving away your meat, it's the same thing as selling it. Use that analogy, and that means that you've got to follow the regulations in your specific area, what they stipulate. you know, in America, you follow the FDA regulations, and wherever else you are in the world, you follow the regulations that your government puts out, and you should follow those. And just your take on gloves. I mean, I'm not pro or anti the use of gloves. That was just an interesting explanation to me why one shouldn't use gloves. But anyway, I just, you know, again, your take on the usage of gloves.
Gil, that you open a can of worms. If on this planet there has been an issue that I've seen people, food safety, food scientists almost murder each other, it was about this issue.
Okay.
I'm stunned at how immovable they stand on their positions, and from you know, it's almost as if there's certain preferences in certain countries around the world. You know,
Yes.
I absolutely. You know, I hear the arguments of the people who saying that if you look at hand, they say, how is it possible to clean? There's so many little folds there, and with the cuticles and the nails and everything, the ability for that to become traps and vectors for micro contamination is so massive. That on the one hand. Then on the other hand, having worked with gloves for very long in my career, and seeing the challenges of gloves to keep them clean and to prevent water from ingressing, you know, into the gloves, and it just becomes a nightmare.
Yes.
You know, my personal take is no gloves. You know, okay. I feel a lot more comfortable. You know, just working without gloves and cleaning my hands, it feels a lot more close. I know where to clean and continually wash and all those. If you have all those regimes in place, I think there's no need for gloves. Other people are absolutely insistent. So, you know, and each company will have their studies that they will reference.
Yes.
That actually, you know, this whole thing of the gloves is something that industry that we do, and I will suggest it's something that we intuitively do, but we must maybe become more specific about it, more deliberate about it, and that is that whatever procedure we have, we must make sure that we validate that procedure.
Yes.
So whatever we do, if we're going to take your the example of freezing of the meat with Trigionella, you know, trigonosis, you know, to protect against that. If you're going to do that and you hear somebody say that freezing of the meat is a good thing, right? Go and read up on it and find out how long must I freeze it, what temperature must I freeze it at, the best way of packaging it for freezing and all those kind of things, and then see if it actually works. See if you can find validation for the step, documented, published research on the subject. These are, you know, the examples that I gave in terms of the carcass wash. All my information that I got from credible universities, where credible studies were done by graduates or undergraduates about this, where there's been proper validation of the step. Maybe I'm not going to validate it myself, but I'm going to look into it. So if I'm going to use a vinegar and I'm going to dilute it 1-to-1 with water, you know, can I find literature that supports that action?
Yes.
You know, so the same thing with gloves. I'm not so much concerned whether they use gloves or don't use gloves as the reason why they use gloves or not use gloves. You know, if you absolutely believe that you should use gloves and you can do it in a way that is safe and it's really going to contribute and add value to what you do, I will say go and do it.
Yeah.
But just doing it because you heard somebody or read on a forum, a Facebook group that they say A, B, and C. Don't do anything just because of that reason. We spoke about the molds. You know, green mold, black mold is bad. Green mold, white mold is good. Red mold is bad. Orange mold is bad. Read up on it.
Understand why.
Don't take the word, even of us. If they listen to this, don't take the word. Go and find the literature. Do the work. Get the foundation right. Right. Develop your own little protocols and procedures. The example that you gave about the dishwasher, you know, contact your manufacturer of the dishwasher and say, is this the procedure, your washing and using your detergents, is that approved for a food environment? Yes or no?
Yes.
Go onto the website, go to the company, challenge the issues, do your homework, and then and you do that only once. And then these are my procedures and this is how I do things. And for anything else, if somebody comes with a better idea, you listen to it, you go and check it. Is this absolutely a fact? Is there not uncle so-and-so's great uncle that's been doing it for the last 300 years in this way? Is there current scientific literature on this thing? And when you look at the literature, don't go and read the whole paper, unless you want to fall asleep. Read the summary in the beginning, right? And read the concluding remarks and for discussion at the end, where they say, in other words, after all is said and done, this is my recommendation. That's the information that you ask.
No, I fully agree with you, and I think so. So for me, the starting point with any of this would be, number one, get your local municipal or local regional regulations on because most of them have put out regulations on meat curing, because that'll tell you everything in terms of how much nitrite you're allowed to use, and all that sort of stuff, temperatures. It gives you a really good guideline, and most of them will roughly be the same. But it also gets onto these sort of topics on what is expected in your region. Again, like I said, in the municipal area that I was, they were anti-gloves and you shouldn't use them. But there are, as you say, there's people who are vehemently for the usage of gloves. I think it's just important, and like Eben said earlier, you wash your hands, you work. If your head's itching and you oh sure, but I was just scratching my head, you go and wash your hands. Now, if you do that with your gloves, take your gloves off, put new gloves on. It's the same thing. So you don't have to wash your hands, but so every time you would wash your hands, you would replace your gloves. And this lady was very adamant about it, and she said it's more a psychological thing that you think you've got the gloves on, that your hands are clean. Yes, your hands are clean, but you're not using your hands. You're touching the surface is being touched by the gloves. So the same process to follow there, and you're 100% right. Again, I like that you brought it back to what your grandmother used to do, and we got to understand, when your grandmother did this, it was 50 years ago. Science has moved along. It's you don't ride around in carriages anymore, as much as it might be very nice or not so nice. I don't know, but it might be romantic to have a carriage and a horse. We don't do it anymore. We ride in very, very modern new cars. And in 5 years' time, the cars are going to have changed and have better technology and safer technology. And we substitute that all the time. Same thing with working with food. Again, I say with tradition. Tradition is fantastic. Go to tradition and take what's good from tradition, but change what is bad and create a new tradition. And it's that regimen of introducing science to what you're doing. And you're working with food, and the first thing you're going to do when you've created your first coppa or pancetta or whatever is you're going to slice it up, and you're going to want to get people's. It's just a natural thing. As humans, we want that affirmation, and we give it to our family, and we want to see the enjoyment that they have, or put out a beautiful meat platter and get that back. And so the whole point of this exercise of what we're doing is a sense of community. It's a sense of sharing. We're doing it because firstly, it's a beautiful art form. Secondly, the culmination of the art form is, or as they say, the proof in the pudding is the eating thereof. And so we want to share what we do, and what we want to produce is the best quality that we can give to our friends and family, and if we end up selling it, to our customers. And again, I go back to that scenario that you've got to take this. You've got to approach this whole thing with the same approach as if you were doing it commercially. You are producing this meat to sell. What are you going to go through? And that's the same regimen that you should apply to just giving it to your loved ones and your mother who's 80 years old, and because those are the people who will directly affect your life if they get sick. I'm not saying that you shouldn't if you're commercial, but I'm just trying to make a point that it's as important as if you're going to sell it. You might not follow, if the regulations state that if you are working with meat in a commercial environment, you've got to wear gloves. You're not necessarily, I mean, nobody does it in their home kitchen. We don't wear gloves and cook our food and stuff. So you might not do that, but then follow that regimen of making sure that you're washing your hands all the time, and you again, no water in the base. I mean, on your work surfaces, no wet rags. I had a big roll of paper, and I still have a kitchen towel. Yes, it gets expensive, but it's not worth giving somebody Listeriosis or E. coli or, heaven forbid, botulism. And just, if you need to wipe your hands with something, dry towelette, wipe your hand, and off you go. So, yeah, very, very interesting. I think dynamic that we dealt with today, and a very, very important one. I think people just, I mean, I've read quite a lot of books on this, Eben, and this is something that seems to get glossed over. I know a lot of people, they write in the books, it's very important to these are the things, but you usually get 1 or 2 or 3 pages about it in a book, and then it glances over. And it's something that in my book, I've also only got, you can only put so many things on a page. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring it back to a discussion like this on video, where people can come and actually learn about how to process, to go about that regimen. I think, Eben, I mean, we've spent just on 2 hours, just under 2 hours, just on cleanliness. So I think we should maybe draw a line in the sand there, and in our next discussion, my sort of vision of this whole thing unraveling, I kind of thought microbes we'd deal with fairly quickly. I think we're probably going to have to do this in 3 segments. I think the next one will probably be good bacterias. So how we deal with getting the good bacterias, or how we proliferate the good bacterias in our meat, so that we get those flavors and smells. And then I would also, and it depends on how long that takes, but I would also then have a session on mold, because I think that we will constantly go back to mold again, and I think that's also a very important one. I did a brief video a while ago, but I think the discussions that you and I have, we really dig into the detail, and I think that's valuable for the home curer as well as for the commercial curer. So, I think if you're happy with that, I think let's draw a line in the sand. I know that you've got a busy day ahead of you as well, and need to get going. So thank you very much again for the time and the energy that you've put into the research and everything into this. And I mean, it was a great discussion. Fantastic. I mean, hell, how cool is it to talk about cleaning your hands?
For 2 hours.
For 2 hours.
Gil, absolutely. I love it. I absolutely share your vision and your views. We've laid the foundation now. Now that now there's not going to be other bacteria that's spoiling what we're trying to do. Now we can become creative with the molds, and also the fermentation bacteria,
100%.
Which I would say those two, the molds and bacteria that's going to ferment, that's a whole world on its own, and I can't wait to get into that with you. So yes, if we even wait this weekend, if we can, I'm ready.
I look forward to it. I've got nothing planned. I'm working on my book and on my website, so meat is the thing.
Great.
So thank you.
I love it, Gil. Thank you so much. Thank you for a fantastic morning.
Yeah, thank you, Eben. Thanks.
If you don't want to miss out on any of our future podcasts, just click on the subscribe button below and hit the notification bell, and you'll be notified as soon as any new podcasts have been posted.